Hi, my name is Tammy,
And I'm Jen.
and they call us Woo. Hello, everybody. Today we are going to be doing a little bit of a continuation of our conversation about toxic positivity. Um, excuse me. We had a lot of good feedback from that episode, a lot of people who found it engaging and gave them some thoughts about maybe ways that they can work on that themselves, or just overall enjoyed the subject matter and the reminders of trying to find a more balanced viewpoint. So one of the things that we thought would be good to talk about is we talked a lot last time about this idea of toxic positivity towards other people, but we want to talk more about toxic positivity towards ourselves, like how we communicate with ourselves. Also ways that we could be creating a big imbalance in how we present ourselves to the world because we feel like we need to have a certain presentation at all times. We need to look like we know what we're doing. We need to be positive all the time, all that other fun stuff. So, kind of kicking this off, it's part of the reason we thought about this too is I've had several experiences over the last couple weeks where, well, maybe a couple months, but where I was talking to other people in caring professions. So whether that be people who are more kind of on the woo side of things, or people who are more in the traditional medical side of things, but just a lot of opportunity to allow people to be a little bit more real, and realizing how much of a relief that felt like to them. Some of them were other business owners, and to be fair, as a business owner myself, and a lot of people who are familiar with this, running a business can be really hard.
Yes.
It can be really, really hard, and there's definitely times that you question your sanity. Can it be very rewarding? Yes, but I think part of the problem comes in sometimes is when there's people who are in these caring professions who do things or know things that help other people. They kind of start to feel like they always have to be on their A game, and they can't really show that they're also people that experience hardships. And it
Yep.
might not even be something that they are thinking. It could just be a subconscious belief that they have implanted in themselves.
Yeah.
It could be things because of feedback they've gotten from other people. I don't know. I kind of think of it as the same way as when you think of the fitness community. There's a lot of people that actually really do resonate with personal trainers, other people in the fitness community who don't look perfect per se, who don't look
Yep.
like they eat 500 calories a day and work out nonstop, because they feel more real. But
Hmm.
unfortunately, we also come upon things where maybe people think that they won't be considered a reliable source if they don't look
Yeah.
like they have all their crap together at all times. So that's kind of
Hmm.
what I visualize in my head. But I've had a good handful of other friends, other people I was talking to that got really emotional when I was talking to them because they were struggling. And they're like, this is really hard right now. There's some things I'm doing that
Yeah.
I'm really challenged with. And I could hear them talk to themselves as they were starting to say things about how hard it was. They immediately then cut themselves off and said, well, I know it's a mindset thing. I know if I do this and I do that, it'll be better. They immediately cut their own thought process off. And it really struck me as like, wow, that's a lot of toxic positivity towards yourself,
Yep.
because you now just told yourself that you can't have those feelings. And me
Yeah.
just saying, you know what? It's okay. This is really
Hmm.
effing hard sometimes. And it's
Yep.
okay to acknowledge that. I see you. I understand that it's hard, and just be, allow yourself to feel that that's fine. Nobody's judging you. And just taking that pressure off of them for a moment where they realize they didn't have to perform for
Yep.
themselves or for me.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't judging them. I didn't think any less of them. They're amazing human beings. It brought tears. It brought a lot of, like, you could just see their shoulders go down where they're like, oh, I really needed to hear that. someone just saying it's okay to not have all the answers all the time. But the part of it that struck me was, and I'm sure I'm just as guilty as anyone else, is this idea that we can't just be real humans, real people that are having real experiences. And I imagine it's probably even more so now because there is so many opportunities for people to see us. There's a lot of curated personas that people have online, sometimes even people who claim to be real. It's very curated. It's very much like, I can't show this, I have to show that. The people who take the selfies like, oh, I just woke up like this. I'm sorry, but BS. That was like your 30th picture to try to make sure that you were just perfectly touzled enough, but you still looked cute. You know what I mean? Like, that's not real.
You're not all like,
right. Like,
those are what my first selfies usually look like.
Plus, it always strikes me too, the people who take pictures like they're sleeping, and I'm like, that's you that took that picture. look at my boo. Like, we just woke up like this. Who is taking the picture? Who is in the room taking the picture of you?
Yeah, that's creepy.
I mean? Like, we don't always think about stuff like that. And because it's become the norm where we are always having to put things out there because we're afraid of, people are really afraid of things now. They're afraid of someone saying bad things about them. Sometimes it's because they've put so much of their self-esteem into how other people view them. Sometimes it's because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing and someone getting offended. Sometimes it's, just there's like a million different reasons why this could happen. But it's a real issue I see now with people having toxic positivity towards themselves. This negative self-talk of, if I don't look like I know what I'm doing at all times, there's a problem.
Yeah.
And for people who are probably interested in this type of podcast, I'm going to venture to say we probably have a lot of people listening who are kind of those caring type of, interested in how the universe works people that probably have experienced this themselves too. So I hope that we can support each other in the same way, but it's a good conversation to have about how we make ourselves feel when we don't have everything perfect.
Yeah.
And what that idea of perfect is in the first place. I think like messy and real and honest, in my mind, that is much more perfect than how many layers of this do I have to get through before you tell me the truth of what's really happening? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We do that to ourselves and other people.
This makes me think of like the videos that you see where people are removing their makeup. Have you seen these videos where it's like this like golden, perfect tanned face that's like flawless, whatever, and then they start like removing the layers of the makeup? That's exactly what I feel like the toxic positivity thing is. It's like we have all these layers, the fake it till we make it layers. We all know how I feel about this. Like of the fake facade that we've been putting on and the layers that we've been putting on and the way that we're shielding ourselves from other people. And you brought up the fear about what other people are going to think and who are we going to offend. It's like all of those layers of makeup that have been put on to cover the one little teeny tiny imperfection, one little pimple that only you're seeing, but you're like layering 20 layers of makeup on, 20 layers of shielding. And then when you finally pull it off, I don't know how many of those I've seen, and I've been like, oh my gosh, this person is so beautiful without makeup. Why do they have all this makeup on? And it's the same thing. Like we're so worried about everybody else that we create this persona. And when we finally let our guard down and let somebody see and allow ourselves to be vulnerable, people are like, oh my gosh, like this is the real you. Like I love this person so much more.
I
And
have a lot of respect for that, and
yeah,
I have a lot of respect for the balance of it, right? Like, you should be just as happy doing artistic things with your face as not having anything on. And we know that that's not always a realistic idea. There's a lot of people who really struggle with that self image,
Yep.
especially
Yep.
in the society we are now that tells us we have to look a certain way in order to be accepted.
Mhm.
I get
Yeah.
all of that.
Yep.
But learning how to be comfortable in what feels like imperfection, but oftentimes is a lot more genuine and beautiful for the people who recognize that that is just as beautiful. Both are beautiful, right? Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's people who will recognize that, and learning how to not worry about the people who don't can be hard. I would imagine, especially if your whole income and stuff like that plays into what this, what your front facing thing is, which I do get in business. There's a certain element to that. There always is. Making sure your reputation is good and all that stuff is important. But what happens when it gets to be so extreme that we're now doing this to ourselves? Like, we can't even be real with ourselves at home.
Yep.
That's my thought, is like, how do we counteract that and allow ourselves to be a little kinder
Yeah.
when we don't have things done perfectly? I see it a lot in some of the younger millennials and Gen Z too that grew up more online,
Hmm.
where there's a lot of things that they have grown up seeing and idolizing, and not realizing that that's not, you're not looking at a person's whole life. You're looking at a small glimpse, and oftentimes only what they want you to see.
Yep.
And internalizing that and thinking that's what they need to represent then too. That's what they need to put out there.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I'm not anti internet or social media or any of that. I think it all has a place and it can be a really beautiful way to bring people together. But also, we really need to support, especially our younger people who need to see that there's other ways to do this. We
Yeah.
kind of talked about that last time too when we were talking about parenting and the idea of being able to just show your child that you are a real person
Yep.
and you don't always have all the answers. It's just being, trying to be real and allowing yourself the opportunity to take a breath and be like, yes, sometimes life is hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is hard, and I don't always have to remind myself that it's for a reason and this and that. Like all these little self-soothing techniques that
Hmm.
maybe used in the right context can be helpful, but when it becomes a thing where we're shutting ourselves down, where
Yep.
it's like, I'm going through this hard thing, but if I just do this or if I just do that, or I have to remember that this is happening for this, or I have to do that. Just let yourself have a feeling that's not like scrubbed up and
Yeah.
and shined up and to make it look
Yeah.
like a pretty little positive picture again, because there's a lot of growth and beauty in the hard stuff.
Yeah. Well,
And
and sometimes continue. Sorry,
oh
I
no, I
will.
was just going to say, and allowing ourselves to feel that.
Yeah. Well, and that lends to what I was going to say is sometimes I have to remind myself that I'm a soul having a human experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, there is this divine aspect to it. Yes, there is this huge energetic picture. There is something larger where I know that everything is okay and that everything's happening for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
My soul came into a human body so that I could experience the
Mm-hmm.
emotions and I could experience the pain and the loss and the grief and the happiness and the joy and all of the things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, from the higher self perspective, like I know all of those self-soothing things, all of those things that are saying it's okay, like you can move, you can make it through. Like, yes, those are all true things. But I signed up to do the
Mm-hmm.
nitty-gritty stuff, to do all of the other things so that I could experience life as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I have to remind myself it is okay to cry my head off. It is okay to say a cuss word every now and again. It's okay to experience things fully because if I'm not allowing myself to experience that here, like the sole purpose that I let myself come to be in this body, I'm not fulfilling that purpose
Mm-hmm.
either. So it's like there's a reason why we're here to experience all this stuff. And I want to experience life to the fullest, even if it feels crappy sometimes. Like I want to feel it. And I don't want to downplay those sensations and those feelings because in the end, like I need to feel it all. I need to
Mm-hmm.
experience it all. And I think it's really important that we do allow ourselves to feel.
Yeah. Well, and when we talked in the last episode about the idea of when we're talking to other people, shutting them down, it's easier to, I think, understand this in the context of your interactions with other people, right?
Hmm.
Like we tend to give ourselves a lot more grace when it comes to, oh, I should work on that with interacting with other people. And we don't always recognize when we're doing it to ourselves, which is
Hmm.
a good thing that we can all do for each other, to be there for each other and support each other and allow ourselves these interactions with people that give us the space and non-judgmental space that we need.
Hmm.
And if you don't have that person, it comes back to just needing to do that for yourself too. I hope that people have people like that, but the reality is sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
But we can still give that to ourselves, and recognizing that we're doing it is a big part of that.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we do that, like we talked last time, sometimes when we do that to other people, it's because we don't want to experience uncomfortable feelings. We're not willing to sit there and let them have these hard feelings because it makes us uncomfortable. Well, yeah,
Hmm.
same thing when you're doing that to yourself. It's a self soothing mechanism. And I do understand, I mean, certainly there's appropriate and inopportune times to have,
Hmm.
a full on meltdown. I get that. There's reasons to have some of these self soothing techniques sometimes, but have we made it become a habit? Do we immediately make ourselves feel worse for having just a real experience?
Yeah.
That's the part where it starts to get challenging, because the more you do it, I think the easier it is to keep doing that and not always
Yeah.
recognize why you feel so crappy deep down inside and you're just putting a happy face over it. And it's kind
Yeah.
of interesting because one of the people I was talking to, she is, I feel like, a very real person.
Hmm.
She's opened her own business and she will talk about, bad days and good days and stuff like that. But overall, she has learned over her life. She herself, I didn't meet her in this phase of her life, so I have a hard time believing she was ever like this, but she herself says she used to be very negative when she was younger, and then she found this different path and she ends up being a lot more positive. And she is great about putting that out there for people about, this happened today. It wasn't the greatest thing, but this is what I'm doing with it. I'm moving forward, whatever.
Hmm.
But it was just a simple conversation with her where acknowledging that even though, in the grand scheme of things, I know she's going to be able to achieve anything she puts her mind to, in that moment, she needed to hear that, yeah, sometimes having a business is really hard. And
Yeah.
that's okay that you are having a hard time with this right now. It's okay that you're being challenged by creating what you want to create with this business. It's okay that it was harder than what you expected, because
Yeah.
oftentimes it is.
Yeah.
Because most of the time when we open a business, we have some type of passion for what we're doing, right? So we have all these great ideas about, like, this is going to be the best thing ever. And there's we can create these wonderful businesses, these wonderful moments. Even if your goal is to create a money making business, you still have a passion for something involved with the business, whether it be creating wealth for yourself or creating an experience for people or whatever the case may be. But, if I mean, honestly, if we sat there and thought about all the hard stuff, we might not ever try to open the business. But the reality is especially the first couple years are really hard.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
impossible, but it doesn't mean that it's not hard. And you do encounter so many things that you wouldn't have expected to encounter. Or
Yeah.
sometimes, you feel let down. Maybe there's people who are all on board, who are supportive, or like, I can't wait for your business to open. Maybe they never come to your business and you start to
Yeah.
feel a little bit hurt about that. There's
Yeah.
all different like levels of things that can happen when you're opening a business. But allowing yourself the space to kick rocks for a minute
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
is okay too. It doesn't mean you're
Yeah.
not going to recover. It doesn't mean you're not going to pick yourself back up. It doesn't mean that maybe worst case scenario, maybe the end to that business is something that would happen, but is that the end to your life? Absolutely not. There's
Yeah.
always opportunities. There's always opportunities for growth. Allowing yourself the opportunity to kick rocks is okay in that process.
I have to acknowledge two different things. One, I have been yawning like several
Yeah.
times, which Tammy knows this about me. When energy starts moving or something is resonating with me, I start yawning because it's my body is clearing energetically. So if anybody's watching and they're noticing that, it's because this is resonating with me
She's not bored.
because no, I'm not bored. I'm not tired. It's there's some stuff flowing through my
Mm-hmm.
system. And I'm one of the people that has talked to Tammy lately about things being hard because there's a lot going on. But the second thing I'm going to acknowledge is when you said go and kick rocks, I was like, oh, why would you kick rocks? They're so pretty. Like I
I mean, I
had
hope
this very
everyone's heard that term before. I don't know.
I
I
had
pull
a
out a lot
very
of stuff
visceral
that I think
reaction.
everyone knows about, and they don't always. So,
Well, you know my love of stones and crystals and rocks and all the things. So I was like, oh, why would you kick them? And then I was like, not the pretty ones. So I was having this internal dialogue like, don't kick crystals. Like they'll break.
I'm
Like
not
don't.
gonna kick my amethyst down the road. Don't worry. I always get like a very visual image of that, of just like, you just lost a ball game or whatever as a kid, and you're just like all
Yep.
angrily kicking rocks down the road. So that's why it always makes sense to me, because yeah, you just sometimes you need to just let out that this did not go the way I planned
Yes.
moment. But that is funny. I have a lot of rocks and crystals in my place, and I don't plan to kick any of those.
I was just like, you're gonna hurt their feelings. Like, oh, oh, geez.
A
That
little
was
glimpse into
interesting.
the way Jen's mind works.
Yes. I used to say goodnight to everything before I went to sleep when I was a kid because I didn't want to hurt anything's feelings. So I
Oh,
would say good night to every single stuffed animal, good night to
that
every,
is
like every piece of
precious.
everything. And it took so long that eventually I was like, okay, I'm just gonna say good night, everybody. And every once in a while, I still will lay down in bed and I'm like, good night, everybody. Like
That is really cute.
everything has feelings in my world. So,
Well, you're not
any whoozy
wrong.
woozy.
You know,
Yeah.
with this whole concept too, I've certainly been just as guilty as anyone else. Um, as a parent, as a business owner, even as a friend, because sometimes your relationship dynamics are developed in a way that one person is like the one that seems to have all the answers to everything. And I've
Mhm.
always been that person, regardless of whether it was a conscious decision to create it that way. I've always been the fixer.
Yeah.
So sometimes when you're the fixer in any relationship, it starts to create this dynamic where you start to feel like you always have to have an answer to something.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what we were talking about before, too. Um, Talking to other people and giving them, ways to fix things when there's not, when that's not what they're asking for,
Mhm.
can be really insulting and can be damaging to their feelings, because sometimes people just need to say things and they don't want you to fix it. They just want to say it. Well, we do that same thing too, right? Like, you end up with this feeling like if you always have the answers, you have to have the answers for yourself too. So you
Yeah.
create, I like to get stuff done, but it doesn't mean I don't procrastinate sometimes. Like, I really don't like bookkeeping. Um, so that is a project I always give myself way too much to do because I put it off or whatever. And I've certainly experienced a lot of guilt around this idea of having to be on top of everything all the time and making myself feel terrible.
Mhm.
When the reality is, I, that's just, it's just me. It's normal. I like doing everything else in my business before I do that.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Does it mean that I give myself permission to just not do it? No. But it does mean that I need to be conscious of how I am talking to myself about it and being okay with I can't do everything. There's not five of me.
Yeah.
And I just need to, I'll get it done, but I just need to not make myself feel terrible for not having everything perfect all the time. And
Yeah.
even as a lesson in, my personal relationship with my family and stuff like that, too, how much easier it is for me to say to somebody else in my family, like, I'm sorry I got that one wrong. I thought this is what you meant. Or, I'm sorry I got really upset about this thing. And now when I think about it, I really shouldn't have gotten that upset. I was probably tired or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, do I do that with myself? Not without a
Mm.
lot of conscious thought. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do I ever go
Yeah.
back and apologize to myself and be like, you know what? Sorry, self. I was really hard on you. You didn't deserve that. I have to think really hard to be able
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
So that's me doing the same type of toxic positivity thing where it's like, you should have all these answers. You should know all these things. It'll all
Mm.
be fine. Just don't think about it this way. And then being able to be like, you really needed to have a little cry right then. So
Yeah.
sorry I didn't give you permission to have that little cry. Let's have it now. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And so how do we as human beings, like we're human, we make mistakes, we create, we miscreate.
Mm-hmm.
How do we go back and start changing our patterns around toxic positivity towards ourselves? Like, how do you get to that point where you can acknowledge and
Mm-hmm.
say, hey, I got that wrong. Like, I wasn't giving myself space. Like, it's okay. This is how I'm going to move forward. How do we do that? Like, that's the
Isn't
hardest
that the
piece.
best question?
Yeah.
It's
I
probably
mean,
very individualized, but yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of internal work.
mhm,
Um, that's probably the good starting point. Through different periods of my life, I've had different types of internal work that I've done once I've recognized. I guess for me, it's when I get the stuck feeling. Like if
mhm,
I'm feel stuck for a while and things are not progressing the way I need to, or I keep having the same experience over and over and over again, um, that's when I start to wonder what exactly is happening. And that's usually when I start to look for some type of internal work that I can do, some type of, whether it be therapy or hypnosis or crystals or Reiki or massage or, all the other things that we talk about. Maybe that's where we start having our community
mhm.
who
Yeah.
can help redirect us when we need a little bit of redirection.
Yeah. Yeah. So I will bring up something that has happened this week for me. So I've been looking at like I used to be a runner. So I used to run 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathon, and I ended up having multiple surgeries. Like I've had 10 surgeries. I had endometriosis and had issues with cysts and all kinds of things. So I've had 10 surgeries for that. And it was inevitable when I was training for a big race. Like I started training for a marathon and I ended up having another surgery like right after I started training.
Mm-hmm.
And it really threw me off my game. And I was like, why the heck? I started beating myself up. Why the heck did I create this in my life? What am I doing wrong? What am I not doing to take care of myself?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, it'll be fine. Like, I'm just going to go have the surgery and then I'll just. And so I went through this cycle of like totally beating myself up and then trying to talk myself out of it by being super toxic positivity girl. Like, I should have had a giant S on my shirt, super toxic positivity girl. Um, but it was like, it was this moment of well, you can do it, you can, and I totally went against all of the feelings that I was having, the negative feelings that I was having, perceived negative feelings that I was having. And it ended up backfiring. And I haven't run for 2.5 years or something because I got so far beyond like, oh, it'll be okay. Like, you just need some time to like rest and group and like went the opposite direction. And the other day I was like, you know what? I've given myself a lot of excuses by trying to be so positive. I've given myself so many
Mm-hmm.
excuses not to care for myself. And it was
That's an interesting way to
positivity.
look at it.
It was really interesting. Like I was over positivifying. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I was being really, really positive about, well, this is just what happened in your life, and like everything happens for a reason. And I went down that path. And well, some of that is okay. I went way overboard and stopped caring for myself and stopped actually looking at what the original feelings were and what the original messages I was giving to myself were because I didn't want to look at the low vibrational, the perceived negative thoughts I was having anymore. I was tired of being in that space. So I went to this other space that kind of felt good, but then it kind of felt crappy. And so it's like this major swing happened. And just this week, like as I was doing all of the stuff here, I was thinking about how much I miss running and how much I miss exercising like I used to and how much I miss these things. And I was like, okay, how did I get to this space? Like, how did I go from there to there? And like now I'm in this space where I'm not happy in either of those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And I really came back to I was trying to avoid the issue, like by projecting outward what I thought everybody else needed to see.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm happy with myself and I'm okay with everything that happened. And like, it was very much like me putting on this face for everybody else. Like, it's okay that all this crappy stuff happened and I had to have all these surgeries. And just this week, I came back to, okay, like, it's okay for me to have feelings about where I was at. It's okay for me to recognize that in that moment I needed to stay positive and I needed something else. But now it's okay for me to actually address the concerns that I had originally, like what got me to the point of having to have those surgeries? Like, what wasn't I doing? Was I eating poorly? What was I doing? And what was the positivity piece about, like staying in that overly positive space.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, actually addressing and looking at both sides of that picture has
Mm-hmm.
brought me to a more balanced space so that I can actually address it and say, okay, like my eating wasn't great. That created an environment for things to grow. Like, I wasn't being very positive. Like, so now I can actually address it. But I needed to do the inner work and I needed to look at where I was on both sides of that coin. And I think that's one of the things that we've kind of been pushed away from doing. It's like we are in a space of trauma and a space of grief or a space of loss or a space of whatever is going on. And we don't want to be there anymore. So we completely switch sides, go to the opposite end of the spectrum, that
Mm-hmm.
toxic positivity. And I think our environment, our society has created this space of one end of the spectrum or the other.
Extremes.
Like
Yeah.
there's
That's the
nothing
word
in the
that
middle
kept
anymore.
popping in
Yeah.
is balance. A lot of people think like if I'm upset, I need to be happy. That is the solution
Yep.
versus balance. There's somewhere in the middle. There's
Yeah.
opportunities for both of those things. You don't need to cut one feeling off with the other.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of extremes in our society right now for
Mhm.
sure when it comes
Yeah.
to self-image, when it comes to politics, when it comes to all different types of things where we are not giving a lot of space for the middle ground.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of what, for me, the topic of toxic positivity is about coming back to the middle ground, coming back to a space where you can be positive, you can be supportive, you can give yourself support, you can give other people support in those moments where they need some positivity without pushing it
Mm-hmm.
beyond. Um, because the toxic piece really is like just being extreme about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we create a balanced space, if we create a container to hold all of the emotions, it gives people space to feel both sides. It gives
Mm-hmm.
people space to feel the perceived negative and the perceived positive. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that might be um, the biggest piece for me. And I don't know if that will help anybody else, but that's the biggest piece for me is
Mm-hmm.
just allowing myself the space to
Mm-hmm.
experience both ends of the spectrum and know that that space, that container is the middle ground that I can come back to.
Yeah. Well, and I think any time that you can take the opportunity to examine your belief systems is important too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes it could be in the form of, you know, the kind of the toxic positivity we were talking about before, of talking about, oh, you just have to manifest this, or you can't think about this bad thing or whatever, like only thinking in the terms of, if you say anything negative at all, then you're breathing that into existence, which
Mm-hmm.
kind of goes back to what you say too, is what we perceive as negative and positive. But also sometimes you see this in the case, and hopefully this doesn't offend anybody, but you see this in the case of the way people communicate about their religious beliefs too. I certainly have seen it happen a lot, where when something hard comes up, people are more than willing to say that, this is in someone else's hands, this is in God's hands, this is that, and kind of toxic positivity themselves that way too, because whether or not you believe that everything has a purpose, whether that be through through God, through your religion, whether that be through just universal enlightenment, whatever the case may
Mm-hmm.
be, most people do believe that there's some type of purpose for the things that happen. But that doesn't take away our own autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take away our decision making process, and it certainly doesn't take away, it shouldn't take away from our ability to experience life,
Yeah.
because sometimes we're missing the point when we, instead of working through this hard thing, just say, oh, it's in somebody else's hands. I'm not going to even think about it. I'm just going to. I mean, I even see that in the way, like, I have some family members who will say things like, say they accomplish something really, really good. They immediately give the credit to somebody else, whether that be God or another person or whatever. It's okay to take credit for the actions that you've taken too. I don't know any belief system that tells you that God wants all the credit for everything all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's
Yeah.
generally speaking, if you've looked through the Bible or whatever other belief systems you have, there is always the conversation about having your own free will to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's allowing yourself the opportunity to work in sync with your belief system without needing to immediately shut stuff off. Or I see that in the case too of, people are struggling and someone immediately tells them, put it in God's hands. Well, maybe they
Yeah.
need you to just listen. Maybe God wants you to just listen. You know what I mean? Like, maybe you are actively working against the will of whoever you believe is making all this
Yeah.
happen, by not just allowing yourself to listen, allowing someone to have an experience that's not pleasant and
Yeah.
work through it, you know?
Yeah.
And then you see it, I see in the more extreme cases, I've have people in my life who have had some pretty severe mental illness. And that's really hard for them to hear that. That makes them feel really small when somebody is trying to express a very real issue they're dealing with, a very real health issue that they're dealing with, very
Hmm.
real feelings they're dealing with. I don't know anyone who has mental health struggles that doesn't desperately want to feel better. I
Yeah.
mean, most of them spend most of their time trying to feel more balanced again.
Yeah.
When you tell somebody, "Oh, well, you know, just put it in God's hands," or when you tell somebody, "Oh, well, you if you just do this or if you just do that," you're cutting off their opportunity to have a real experience. Well, are we doing this to ourselves too? If you are struggling with all of these things, are you making yourself feel small by
Yeah.
saying, I'm not allowed to have this experience? I need to just, put it off somewhere else and not think about it. And I'm not trying to say that we, you know, wallow in our misery and never move forward in life. That's not the point of this at all. It's just allowing our self-talk to start to shift, which I know can be
Yeah.
very challenging when you deal with some of these very severe. People deal with really severe depression and other things that make it really hard to give yourself the encouragement that you need. But maybe even just the little things, allowing yourself one thing that day, that one voice in your head that tells you, like, this is okay to feel this way right now.
Yeah.
um we don't need to think about 5 years from now and what that's going to look like. Let's just do one thing today. One
Yeah.
thing. Let's have this feeling, and then, don't make myself feel crappy because I can't clean up my house. Let's throw that shirt in the hamper and be like, yes, that's my win. You know what I mean? That feels more authentic. It feels more like a real positivity because you know that you're allowing yourself to do what's within your reach and what's within your realm without telling yourself like you're just a crappy human being because your house looks like a mess and you're depressed. Like,
Hmm.
I know it's challenging, and I'm not trying to simplify things by saying there's not other things that people need when they're dealing with really severe mental health crisis, but maybe that's your win for the day, having that moment where you're like, I'm okay with not being okay right now.
Yeah.
I'll continue to move forward tomorrow. Today I'm just okay with not being okay.
Yep.
And then allowing other people around you to step up and be like, this is okay.
Hmm.
you know, you can be
Yeah.
like this and I still love you.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
I know this all sounds like very simple answers to very complicated questions, and I certainly can't say that I know all the answers to anything. But hopefully there's just little pieces of things that might be enough to make someone think about how they feel about themselves and how they view themselves and what they're allowing themselves to experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I would urge people to um if you're struggling, if you know that you're somebody who has been um following a path of toxic positivity with yourself and just setting all of your emotions aside and trying to love it away, um because a lot of the time that's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
um Take a look at like where in your life you're doing that. Just take inventory first.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes we don't recognize that we're doing it to ourselves. We don't
Right.
recognize where we're doing these things. So if you do recognize it once, one, that's a win because you recognized it once. But start actually looking at how you're talking to yourself and the
Mm-hmm.
things that you're saying. Um, because if you recognize it, you can start addressing it,
Mm-hmm.
because that's that's always going to be the first step, is acknowledging that it's happening so that you can address it.
Yep.
Um,
There's a book I read, which of course I'm totally spacing on the name right now, that our friend Angie, the hypnotist, had recommended, and it was it The Secret Language of Feelings? And it was kind of an interesting and profound book because it was talking about how what feelings are, feelings and emotions. You know, you have these emotions, they bring up sometimes physical or otherwise, you know, it could be joy, it could be sadness, whatever. It brings up something physical, something we connect with that emotion,
Mm-hmm.
and how to um, understand what's happening. You know, it gave like different questions to ask yourself to try to understand what was happening, but then also how to address your actual needs. Because I think the core of all of this is when we're doing this to ourselves or others, we're not addressing actual needs. So it's more than
Yeah.
likely going to keep on coming up over and over and over again until we understand what our actual need is. And once we address that, we start to see a shift in
Yep.
the way that we process things. But until we're able to sit and be a little bit introspective
Mm-hmm.
and, like you said, really just kind of try to figure out, okay, I'm not going to try to over positive this. I'm just going to sit and actually write down what's happening. Where do I feel it in my body? What could this mean as far as needs that need to be addressed? You know, like loneliness,
Yep.
for instance.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hard one because you can't always just magically make someone appear in your life that's going to make you feel less lonely, but you can
Yeah.
sit down and figure out what things could you actively do to try to address that need, whether
Yeah.
it be putting yourself out there in certain ways or whatever the case may be. Could it be something as simple as, you know, spending a little bit of time with yourself and going through some of these self-care practices, showing yourself some of that love? It could be that simple. Could it be something where you're trying to actively engage with other people? It could be something like that too. But the book was really interesting because it gave a lot of options too, and there's a lot of resources out there for people
Yeah.
who maybe feel like they have this big magnificent problem that they don't want to sit and think about because it's too much. You know, and how do
Yeah.
we break it up into bite-sized pieces and allow ourselves some what feels like real positivity, where we're not ignoring the problem, we're not saying, you know, just think differently and everything will work out. We're feeling like we're actively taking a role in how to address our needs and make ourselves feel a little bit more comfortable
Yeah.
in our own
Yeah.
skin or with whatever issue that we have going on. There's a ton of resources out there like that.
Yeah.
So perhaps, you know, meditation and journaling, just really simple things that we all kind of know, will
Mm-hmm.
help. And the interesting thing
Yeah.
about meditation too is there is a plethora of scientific information out there that shows that meditation actually does create new neural pathways. It's one of the only things that's been shown to do that. And
Mm-hmm.
for anyone who doesn't quite understand what that means, it's like the little streets that you've built in your brain. So your this thing happens, your brain has this well-traveled road that it goes down and says, "Okay, when this thing happens, this is how I respond."
Mm-hmm.
When you create new neural pathways, you can create little side roads and a new way for your brain to react to things. So, say for instance, it's more of a negative thing. Like myself, I've struggled with eating disorders in my life. I created neural pathways in my head that said, you know, when this stressor happens, I'm going to eat because
Mm-hmm.
eating is going to make me feel better. Well, did it? Not necessarily, but that's a whole conversation for another day. So creating new neural pathways would be in that instance like, okay, this stressor happens. I've now created this alternate thing that I can do. And the more I
Mm-hmm.
travel that side road, the more that becomes my main road. And then instead of going immediately to this habit that makes me feel ultimately not great, I'm going to this different habit that gives me more nourishment and makes me
Yeah.
feel like something more productive and more healthy.
Yep.
So meditation being one of the only things that can do that is pretty powerful. It's pretty impressive. And it's the only time I think we give ourselves an opportunity to actually just allow things to process, but also we start to get a clearer picture of ourselves. We get more connected with ourselves. We start to understand some of those things that maybe we didn't notice before. Like, I didn't realize when I did this, this happened.
Mm-hmm.
You start to recognize those things when you start creating a new way to do things.
Yeah.
So uh, it's one of the things that most people say that they want to do and they don't do enough of. But I know I also spent a long period in my life being kind of an all or nothing person. Like if I don't do everything, then I just do none of that, and I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'll work on it again tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'll get it all perfect tomorrow. And I had a very wise friend of mine that did a little bit of coaching with me at one point that really just helped me encourage myself to realize that you can reset at any time of the day. You can reset every second if you need to. You
Yeah.
didn't like blow your day by not meditating for 20 minutes that morning. Can you meditate for 2 minutes sometime during your day? Probably. Can you meditate for 5 minutes? Probably. Is
Yeah.
that going to make a difference in the grand scheme of things? Absolutely, it will.
Mm-hmm.
So, those really simple things that we all kind of know work, allowing ourselves the opportunity to actually give ourselves a little bit of that self-care, I think is helpful too. And I'm just as guilty as everyone else of not meditating as much as I would like to.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to remind myself, like, give yourself a few minutes. You could do it.
Yeah.
Give yourself a few minutes. And I also have to then not kick myself in the pants if I miss a day, and
Yeah.
say, it's all right. We'll give ourselves a couple minutes. But today, if all I can do is sit on the couch and have a kicking rock moment, I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to regroup later, but I'm not going to worry about that right now.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Well, it kind of sounds like what both of us are saying is that it comes down to acknowledging what's happening and caring for ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
like doing self-care. And
Real
that could
self-care.
mean, yeah, I was gonna say, and that can mean something different to
Mm-hmm.
everybody. I mean, some people don't like traditional meditation, like they don't like sitting in silence and
Mm-hmm.
trying to be calm. And that meditation means a lot of different things, just so you know. You
There's
could
so
also do
many good,
mantras.
yeah, and there's
Um,
good guided meditation out there. You don't have to
yep.
just sit there in silence and worry about what's going to pop up in your brain.
Nope. And there is walking meditations. There's
Mm-hmm.
different things that you can do that are in that same line of practice.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many different self-care options that we have now.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would say is if there's something that you feel good doing, something that really brings you joy,
Mm-hmm.
that might be your self-care modality.
Yeah.
Like, if you absolutely hate meditating, probably don't
Yeah.
do that. Like,
That's fair. Yes.
don't force yourself to do something that you don't want to do, but find something that brings you joy and brings you peace
Mm-hmm.
and use that as a small win. Use that as a way to bring yourself to a peaceful space
Mm-hmm.
so that you are bringing something positive that's legit positive into your life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because really, when we're caring for ourselves and we're loving on ourselves and we're allowing other people to be support systems for us, it's much harder to put ourselves in the position where we feel like we need to fake it till we make it and we
Mm-hmm.
need to put on a different face for everybody else or for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Really, that's what I think it comes down to.
True. And part of being honest and real in our support system is, I think, also being able to lovingly call each other out when we
Mhm.
do notice that someone's either doing this to themselves, toxic positivity towards themselves or others.
Yep.
Real supportive relationships, real loving relationships,
Yeah.
I feel don't mean that you always are saying what you think the other person wants to hear.
No.
Sometimes it's lovingly and gently being like, you know what? I understand that you're going through something hard right now. It's
Mhm.
okay. You can have that hard moment, and I'll just be here and listen. I
You mean it's not saying get your shit together,
well,
lady? Like,
Well, that might be a moment too. But that is a I think a very loving thing to do for each other, but also a loving thing to do for ourselves. Being real with ourselves
Yeah.
and being real about what we can accomplish and being real about when we know that it's time to move on and when we know that it's time to give ourselves a break.
Yep.
Being honest. Yeah, I guess the last several years have been a journey in dis- just finding true honesty in myself and in other people. I think it's
Yep.
part of the reason I kind of laugh about this now, but there's people in my life that are on the spectrum, some diagnosed, some not, but I'm pretty positive, which
Yeah.
is fine. But why I am so engaged with people who are on the spectrum, I realize a lot of it has to do with sometimes they present socially in a very honest, almost blunt manner. That
Hmm.
is so much more refreshing to me than sitting there for 10 minutes trying to figure out what angle someone is coming from or knowing that they don't mean what they're saying, but they're saying it anyway. Like having the real, honest, like weird conversations is so much fun.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
feels better. It feels more, authentic. And if we can strive to find that type of honesty in ourselves and in each other, where we can just be okay with all of the things that happen, all of our life experiences, I think
Yeah.
we're going to find a more peaceful, balanced outlook on things.
Yeah.
And admitting when our current belief systems aren't working for us. And I'm not just
Yeah.
talking about like faith and religion, I'm talking about belief systems in general.
Yeah.
Admitting when you realize that this you've been doing the same thing over and over again and you're getting the same results and you're tired of it. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
just questioning, learning, trying to give ourselves the opportunity to do things differently if we feel like we need to.
Yeah. I think that that sums it up very, very well. Like it's all about the opportunities that we have and the opportunities to care for ourselves and the
Mm-hmm.
opportunities to be be there to be supportive in the most balanced way possible for the
Mm-hmm.
people around us.
Mm-hmm. And then
Yeah.
being okay when you know it's not balanced and you know I you know you're going to keep trying.
Hmm.
But today it's not balanced and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
mean, I see that on both sides, honestly. When we talk about this toxic positivity thing, a lot of times people who are way, way on that side of things tend to look like really overly like sunshiny and like everything
Mhm.
is great and wonderful and beautiful all the time. And then you see, the other end of the spectrum where it's people who are really feeling not great. Maybe they're
Mhm.
having a hard time with all this stuff, but they're telling themselves that they're not great and they can't accomplish anything because they're not doing things right, whatever. It's this whole spectrum of ways that we can find this toxic positivity in our lives, but we can we can have those days and still acknowledge that we can find balance again at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can try, you know. We're
That's all we can do.
right.
No,
We're
that's not what Yoda said.
do or do not. There is no try.
Yes, do it. Do it.
But the reality
Well,
is, like you said before, it's all human experience, and there's something beautiful and gritty and wonderful and lovely about being humans and having this human experience and
yeah.
trying our best to learn how to be kind to ourselves and others in a very real, honest way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Tammy, I think that we're probably getting on the end of the chatty
Probably.
spectrum again.
Of course.
So I'm going to say that I think that we have talked a lot about this today, and I'm hoping that our listeners got something out of it
Yeah.
and find some time to assess where they're at on this positivity spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And if they have any ideas for us or they have any feedback regarding toxic positivity, we would love to hear it so that we can we can learn from you as you learn from us because the teacher is the student and the student is the teacher. So
Absolutely.
I am grateful that you're all here, and we will see you next week.
Yes, see you later.
Thanks everybody for listening. If you liked what you heard today, please subscribe and check the show description for the links to the show. We would love to hear your thoughts below on this episode, as well as anything that you'd like us to talk about on future episodes. Remember, everybody, you are unique just the way you are, and that is why they call us Woo.
Mm-hmm.